So yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning into today's topic. This is called Beyond Recruitment, Building Inclusion into Every Employee's Touch Point. And I run these webinars every fortnight, and my mission is that I want to create the best place on earth to learn how to build inclusion into how your business runs. So we're going to be here sharing lots of knowledge and experience from one another. One of the things I just want to get across is that a lot of businesses, when they go on their ED&I journey, they equate inclusion with recruitment only. So they're looking at how they can get more diverse talent into their organization. The question, though, is what happens when recruitment slows down or freezes? So at the moment, there's lots of organizations that are going through some financial turmoil. There's lots of organizations that are slowing down their headcount recruitment, or they have put a recruitment freeze in place. So what happens then if we're not able to recruit diverse talent into the organization? We really need to start focusing on inclusion beyond the entry point of people joining your organization and starting to think about their experience once they're on the inside. So diversity without inclusion doesn't work. People won't thrive and they won't stay working for you. So if we think about the employee life cycle, it's got multiple touch points as kind of illustrated on the screen. So there's lots of different stages to the employee life cycle. So we're looking at things like your brand attraction, recruitment, onboarding, developing people, retaining people, and an area that often gets overlooked is separation, or when somebody leaves your organization. So there are multiple employee touch points throughout this life cycle. But at each stage of the life cycle, there are lots of barriers that can appear. These can be subtle barriers, often unintended and difficult to spot, or they can be systemic barriers that have developed over time and have just become the norm, or just the way that you do things around here. So we need to think about the employee life cycle as a bit like a customer experience. And this is something that I wrote about in my first book called Inclusive Growth. And I wrote a whole chapter called the Colleague Experience and Design. And I took a load of experience and principles of when I worked in user experience and design at the BBC, and I was working on website development and app development and accessibility online. But actually, a lot of the principles around user experience and design can be taken and applied to the work that we do around creating more equitable, diverse, and inclusive workplaces. So we need to think of it like a customer experience and think about where are people dropping out along the way, and how can we as practitioners use empathy to understand what does it feel like for different people at different stages of the life cycle. So for example, if you're a disabled person, what must it be like going through your recruitment process? If you are a new parent, what must it be like going for a promotion in your organization? Or what must it be like for somebody who's returning to the workplace after a prolonged absence? Maybe they took a career break, or maybe they've had a long-term health condition. But leaders need visibility to understand what's going on. So we need to map out the journey to understand where the friction is occurring along that life cycle. So I like to think of this as like speed humps and roadblocks. The speed humps are the things that slow you down. So they could be inflexible policies, they could be having unclear career pathways, or we've got roadblocks. So these are the things that are actually preventing progress entirely. They are stopping you from proceeding somehow. So it could be a significant bias within your job offer stage of your recruitment process, or the lack of or the inefficiency of implementing workplace adjustments for people that need it. So these speed humps and roadblocks, they don't just frustrate your employees, they actually create talent loss, disengagement, and employee turnover, which is quite expensive. So we need to ask ourselves, where is it that people are slowing down, or where have they stopped completely? Naming the barrier is the first step that we can take towards removing that barrier. Very often, inclusion is retrofitted. It's a bit of an afterthought, and we kind of patch solutions after the problems emerge. A better approach, and this is what I learned when I was working in usability and accessibility at the BBC, is that we need to design inclusion from the beginning of the process, from the very start of the process. So within user experience and design, we've got a simple principle of putting yourself in the shoes of different customers or clients, or in our case, putting yourself in the shoes of different employees. And actually making small design tweaks can make a huge difference. We don't often have to just overhaul a particular process or way of doing things. We can make small tweaks along the way and we can polish things. And your leaders, they don't need to be experts in colleague experience and design, as I like to put it. They just need to be strategic in the way that they're thinking about tackling this. And they need to have a high degree of empathy. And if you tuned into one of our previous webinars around inclusive leadership behaviors, you'll know that empathy is one of the 6 behaviors that we talk about in terms of the Talogy perceptions framework that we use to measure inclusive leadership behaviors. So inclusion it's not a one-off project. It's not something that you just tick the box and say, we've done that, we've run this initiative, or we've run this event, we've done it, let's move on. It's something that over time, it has to become part of your everyday business. So here are some practical examples of things that you can change if you think about your employee experience. Having structured interviews is a way of trying to reduce the impact of bias. Having an onboarding checklist to make sure that when people join your organization, you're capturing their workplace adjustments. And then you have a really slick process of being able to organize those workplace adjustments so that they can do their jobs properly. Thinking about flexibility within your career pathways for somebody, for example, who might have a parent or caring responsibilities, or maybe somebody who's got a long-term disability or long-term health condition with the fluctuating energy levels, and maybe they need some flexibility in terms of their career pathway. But also think about how you engage with your alumni, people that have left your organization, because this extends beyond people working for you. And I learned this when I worked for Deloitte, where we had a really good alumni program, because our philosophy at Deloitte was that we might have an accountant working in the firm that then becomes the CFO of an organization somewhere. And then when they're thinking of appointing an auditor for their business, we would like them to think about coming back to Deloitte as their auditor or tax advisor, for example. So it's about building or maintaining relationships with people who have already left your organization and making sure that there's equitableness in terms of people leaving the business. So I just want to apply this to your organization. And this is just an open conversation. But if we were to map your employee life cycle today, so thinking about how you're positioning your brand, how you're attracting and recruiting people, performance management, that kind of thing, where would you find the biggest speed humps or roadblocks in your organization? And what do you think is one small change that could be taken to just reduce the speed hump or the roadblock? Has anyone got any thoughts on this? So here's an additional exercise I'd like to do with you briefly. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just pause the video and answer this yourself. But could you just think about one employee identity or life event? So it might be somebody becomes a parent for the first time, or somebody acquires a disability, or you've got a mid-career returner. In your mind, just map out their experience through one stage of the life cycle and think about where might they face bias or inflexibility, and what would you change within your organization to remove that friction? Yeah, so thanks for tuning into today's topic. Hopefully you found that interesting. Um, if you do want some help just turning today's topic into action for your organization, I do have some slots in my diary where you can just have a 25-minute conversation with me. It's completely free. It's not a sales conversation, by the way. It's a genuine offer to sit down with you for 25 minutes to think about what your particular challenge or issue or opportunity is in your organization, and you can bring that to the table. You'll have some practical takeaways that you can implement